Hey everybody, let's construct a sevenfold star rosette, shall we? So I'm in GeoGebra Classic 5. You can see I have my algebra view open, my graphics view, and my properties view. If you don't see all of these, that's okay. You do definitely want to make sure you can see your graphics view and algebra view right now. And you can get to those through your view menu, algebra and graphics. And we also want to make sure our input bar is visible. We're going to use that a lot. So we're going to start by creating a couple of points. I'm going to create the point A equals open parentheses 0, 0, and that's creating a point A with coordinates 0, 0. I could have also used my point tool and clicked and then double clicked over here in the algebra view and edited the coordinates. But to me, it's easier just to create the point in the input bar. So now I'm going to also create point B equals 1, 0. And kind of what that does is it makes sure I have these 2 points on the same horizontal line from each other. And I'm also sort of standardizing distance by having them 1 unit away from each other. So then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to create a 7-sided regular polygon. So I'm going to go up here to my polygon tool and I'm going to click the little drop down arrow next to it and I'm going to click on regular polygon. And what that's going to do is it allows me to click on 2 points. So I'm going to click on A and then B, and that's defining one side of my regular polygon. And then I tell it how many vertices I want. So I want a 7-sided, 7-vertex polygon. And then I click OK, and it creates my polygon for me. So I'm going to use my scroll wheel to zoom out a little bit, click on my arrow move tool to drag my space down a little bit, just so I have this centered. Now, I want to be able to click inside this polygon without selecting the polygon. So I can either select the polygon with my arrow tool in the graphics view or over here in the algebra view. And I want to go into properties. If you don't already see your properties window, you can right click either on the polygon in graphics or in algebra and go to object properties. So then we're going to go over to the color tab and I'm going to drag the opacity bar down to 0 so that now if I click inside that polygon, I'm not selecting it because we're going to want to create some stuff inside here. Cool. So now I want to focus on this line segment AB. Notice I can move my labels around, but I can't drag them too far away from what they label. So feel free to always move those labels out of the way. I'm not going to bother hiding them for this construction, but I will often hide labels as I go, especially for more complicated things. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the midpoint between A and B. There's a number of different ways we could do this. Under the point tool, if I click my little drop down, there's a midpoint or center tool. And what this does is it allows me, so you can see when you hover over a tool, it tells you how to use it. So I'm going to select 2 points, A and then B, and it finds the midpoint there. So my midpoint is H. So next, I'm going to create a circle whose center is A and that passes through H. So a circle around this vertex whose radius is that distance AH. And that's my default circle tool. So this circle with center through point. We have a lot of different circle tools, but I just want the first one. And I'm going to click on center A and then a point I want on the circle, so H. So that creates this circle center C. Next, I want to find the center of my polygon, and I need these other lines also, so this is why I'm constructing it the way I am. But the way I'm going to construct it is by creating perpendicular bisectors to side AB and side AG with my perpendicular bisector tool. So under the perpendicular line tool, if I click the drop down, I get to my perpendicular bisector tool. And what that does is it will create a line that passes through the midpoint of a line segment that's perpendicular to that line segment. So I'm going to click on A, then B again. And now I've constructed the perpendicular line segment of AB. And I'm going to do it again for A and G. And it doesn't matter if I click G first, then A, or A first, then G. So now I have these two lines, M and N, and we can see that they intersect in the center of this polygon, but I need to actually define a point here. So I'm going to go back up to where my midpoint tool is under point, and I'm going to go to the intersect tool. And there's a couple of different ways I can do this. You'll notice when I move my cursor over that intersection, it turns into a hand. So I can just click on that point and it'll snap to that intersection. Another way we can do it is with the intersect tool selected, I can click on the lines individually. So if I want the intersection of line M and then line N, that finds that intersection. Now, this point is the center of my polygon and sort of the center of all the things that I'm going to do. So I want to rename this as O. So often in mathematics, we use O for the origin or the center of something. So I want to rename that. So I'm going to go to my arrow tool. I can do this either in algebra or in the graphics view, but I'm going to right click on point I, and I'm going to rename it as capital O. So we always want capital letters for our points. So now I've got this point O that everything is going to be centered around. Next, I want to go to my line tool. So this is the default tool next to the point tool. And I'm going to click on point A and point O. And now I've got a number of different lines here. So what we want to find next is where that line intersects our circle. So I'm going to take my intersect tool again. And this time I just want to click on that intersection. If I click on the circle and the line, I'll get that point, but I'll also get this point on the other side where the line intersects the circle. And it would be fine if we had that, we just don't need it. So I really just want this one. All right, so I've got that point I there. I'm just going to move the label out of the way a little bit. Now we're going to add the element that's going to give us the ability to change the angles of our rosette and create an animation. So we're going to introduce a slider. So next to the second to last tool up here in the menu is the slider tool. And we're just going to click on that tool. It also has a number of other tools under it, but we want the slider. And I just want to click anywhere I've got open space. I like this top left area for my slider. And we're going to enter some information about it. So we want this, basically what we're doing is we're creating a variable. So a value that can change, that I can create other things that are dependent on that variable. And our variable is going to represent an angle. And alpha is the default first variable for an angle, and that's fine. We want to keep our minimum value at 0. We're going to change our maximum value to 90. Careful you don't delete the degree symbol. And I'm going to change my increment value to 0.5. If you accidentally delete your degree symbol, that's okay. You can always hit cancel and redo it. So I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to move back to my arrow tool. And now I can move this slider, but it doesn't do anything. So all it's doing is holding a value of a variable. So let's use this variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create I want to create a line that goes through point I that's at a particular angle to this line AO. And to define a line, we need 2 points. So I want a point that's either, I could use either O or A, but that is a rotation about point I by alpha. So I'm going to pick A. So what I'm going to do is in my input bar, I'm going to type rotate. And it is a capital R for rotate, but if you type a lowercase r, GeoGebra will still know what you're trying to do. For variable names, you like A or C or O, you do have to be a little bit more specific about your variable being capitalized, but the functions, it'll recognize them if you don't capitalize. And you can see there's a number of different ways you can enter things. So we want to rotate an object by an angle about a point. So that second option. So I don't have to click on that option, but I'm just going to open parentheses. I'm going to tell it the thing I want to rotate. So I want to rotate A. I want to rotate by alpha. So I'm going to do comma. And then all the way over here at the other end of my input bar, you see a little alpha. That's for our special symbols. So I'm going to click on alpha. So I'm going to rotate A by alpha, comma, and I'm going to rotate about point I. So that's my center of rotation. And I've already got my closed parentheses in there, so I'm going to click enter. And so now we see we've got this point A prime that's created. And if I move my slider, you can see that point is rotating away from point A at 0 to 90 degrees. So I'm going to grab my line tool and I'm going to create a line between I and A prime. And I like this line to be blue and a little bit thicker than my other lines. Whatever style you have is fine. I like to keep this one blue because this is going to be one of my actual pattern lines. Now, if we move our slider, you can see that this line rotates. Woo, we're getting there. Awesome. Okay. So now I just want to find a couple more intersections. So we've got this line Q, and let's find where that intersects line N. So this point right here. So I'm going to grab my intersect tool. And again, I can either select those two lines separately or I can just click on the intersection. So notice if you move your slider, right, that intersection point changes because it's dependent on those two lines. Cool. So basically, all of the pattern lines for our rosette will stem from this single blue line. And we're going to get them by reflecting this blue line over other lines. So I've already got most of the lines, but one that I don't have is I need the angle bisector of IAH. So I'm going to go up here right now, it's on my perpendicular bisector tool, but the tool next to the line tool, and I'm going to click the little drop down and I want to go to angle bisector. So you can see we can either select 3 points or 2 lines. I want to select 3 points because I just want the single angle bisector. And we need to make sure we select the point that's the vertex of our angle in the middle. So I'm going to click on I, then A, then H. So I've created this angle bisector here. And I like my angle bisectors to be dashed. So I'm going to go over here under Style in Properties and click on the dash line. Notice if I move my slider, that line doesn't change because it wasn't dependent on that blue line. But now I do want to find the intersection of that line with the blue line. So I'm going to grab my intersect tool and I'm going to click on that intersection. So I get that point K. We can now see that point K moving, right? All three, A prime and K, are all at the same point there, but they shift. as our angle moves. All right, so now we're going to do some reflections. So my reflect about line tool is the one that I want. And you can see, oops, when I hover over it, that I select the object I want to reflect first, and then I select the line that I want it to reflect over. So we're going to select our blue line first, and then we want to reflect over that angle bisector. So I'm going to click on my blue line Q, and then I'm going to click on my dashed line R. And we can see that this line Q prime is the mirror image of line Q over that dashed line. Again, I can play with my slider and see how they're mirror images of each other. Cool. Hope that's okay for everybody. So then next, I want to take that line that I just reflected, or got via reflection, Q prime, and I want to reflect it over this line segment AB. So I'm going to click on that line segment, and now I have this line Q prime. Again, I can move my slider and I can see how those are changing. I'm going to recenter a little bit here and zoom in so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. Okay. I'm going to do another reflection. This time I'm going to take line Q and I'm going to reflect it over line N. So that gives me this line, Q prime sub 1. And then I also want to reflect this line Q over line P. So reflect about line tool, click on the blue line Q, and then click on line P or line OA. Okay, so it's starting to get a little complicated, but hopefully everybody's stuck with me. If you got lost at any point, just go back in the video or the handout, and I'm sure you'll be able to catch up. All right, so next I want to define some intersections. So let's define, let me grab my intersect tool. And I want this point right here, oops, that's the intersection of my Q prime 1 with line P. So notice there, I wasn't able to click directly on the intersection. I had to click on the line and then the line. And I want the intersection of line M, so that vertical line, with line Q prime 2, so right here. If you're having trouble seeing those intersections, you can always move your slider around to make them a little bit more clear, especially if it looks like your two lines are really close to each other, where an intersection needs to be. Always a good idea to move your slider around to make sure you defined things correctly. So then next I want the intersection of line P and line Q double prime. So that's going to be this one here. So there's line P and there's line Q double prime right there. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to define some of the key shapes, and we've basically got all the information that we need. We're going to have a kite that's going to form here, a petal that's going to form here, and a partial star that's going to form here. So to create the last couple of points of my partial star, I'm going to reflect some points. So I want reflect about line, and I want to reflect K and H over line P. So let's do K first. So I'm going to click on point K and then line P. So that gives me K prime. And then I'm going to click on H and then line P and that gives me H prime over here. And we can see H prime isn't moving, but K and K prime move symmetric with respect to each other, and line N moves. So let's get our angle to like somewhere around 20-ish. And I want not the regular polygon tool, but just the polygon tool. And we're going to start defining some polygons. So I want this partial star. So I'm going to click on I, K prime, H prime, N, H, K, and then back to I. And then I'm going to create this little kite here. So I'm going to click on L, J, I, M, and then back to L. So now when we move our slider, all kinds of interesting things are happening. We're almost there, you guys. All right, so this is where we get a little mathy, a little programming with it. Well, we've been kind of mathy the whole time. It is geometry after all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create sequences of rotations of these two polygons about this center point O. So we're going to go down here into the input bar, and I'm going to type sequence, open parentheses. I want a sequence of rotations, so I'm going to type rotate. Remember, we rotated point A about point I earlier. Now I'm going to rotate a polygon. So I'm going to open parentheses. I tell it what I want to rotate, and this kite is quadrilateral Q1, so little q1. I tell it by how much I want to rotate it. Well, we're looking at a 7-fold rosette, and there are 2 pi radians around in a whole circle. So I want 2 pi over 7 incremented by 1 7 times. Okay, so we could do 360 degrees over 7. I prefer 2 pi radians over 7. Mostly because I can type the letters pi and GeoGebra knows what I mean. I don't need to go find my pi symbol in order for it to work. So I'm going to type 2 asterisk for times, pi for pi, and then I'm going to put times I, because I need this index variable here that I'll explain in a second. So 2 pi I, and then slash 7, so divided by 7. So 2 pi I over 7, that's how much I want to rotate. And I want to rotate about capital O, close parentheses, comma. Now I need to tell it that I is an index variable, and it's going to vary from 0 to 6. So basically what this is doing is it's taking that variable I and replacing it with the numbers 0 through 6. So when I plug 0 in for I, I'm not rotating at all. When I plug 1 in, I'm rotating by 2 pi over 7. When I'm rotating by 2, it's 2 pi times 2 over 7, all the way up to 2 pi times 6 over 7. And 2 pi times 7 over 7 would be back at 0, which is why we start at 6. So what I'm going to do now, since we've got all that in and we know it works because the sequence populated, is I'm going to copy Control C, and then I'm going to click Enter, just so that I have that. You could paste it in a notepad file, but we only need it once. So I'm going to click Paste in here, and I'm going to replace Q1 with, what is the name of this polygon? It is hexagon poly 2. So I'm going to replace Q1 with poly 2, and then I'm going to hit Enter. And now we've got it. So let me scroll out, reposition, and let's see. So I move my slider, and it does exactly what I want it to do. So really all we have left to do is just hide stuff we don't want to see. So if your algebra view doesn't look exactly like mine, click the little drop down bar and sort by object type. So what that's going to do is going to group things by object. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on line, whoops, line, right click, and that selects all of them. And I'm going to hide all of my lines. So click Show Object. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my points. So I'm going to select all of them and Show Object to hide them. And I'm going to collapse those groups. Oops, my GeoGebra is being a little bit laggy. And I'm going to hide Q1. I'm going to hide Poly 1. And I'm going to hide Poly 2. And I'm going to hide my conic circle C. And so all I'm showing now is my angle alpha and my two lists, my two sequences L1 and L2. And before I forget, we really should have done this at the very beginning, is we're going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to call this sevenfold Rosette. And there we have it. So if I want to animate it, all I have to do is right click on my slider and click Animation On. And in the Properties tab under Slider, you can change the speed and you can change how it repeats. Play around, have fun. You can change the colors of things, all sorts of fun stuff. When I posted this on Instagram, I added a picture in the back. So I can go to Edit, Insert Image from a file. And I've got this cool tea-stained paper that I like to use. And I like to put this in the background. Always looks fun. But then I need to change the opacity. So I'm going to go up here and highlight my two lists. So I shift clicked and I'm going to increase the opacity so they show up a little bit better. You can also, I wouldn't have been able to click them over here because they're in the same layer as that background. So I'm going to move them up to layer 1 under the advanced tab. And the same thing for my my slider so that now I can still manipulate it. And there we have it. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know how you did.